Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Beyond the Present podcast. My name is Daniel Mulligan, and I'm here joined live by Pouya from Canada. Hey there, my man, how's it going?
Life is great. It's been a while. How are you?
I am doing terrific. First, I got a little bit of a cold here, but things are, for the most part, pretty fine. And, of course, we have Marvin back for yet another show. Marvin, wie geht's? Alles in Ordnung?
Yeah, it's going great.
All right, it's going pretty great. Marvin, I want to ask you one question about your name, because your name, of course, is German. And in the German language, obviously, we don't have the rolling R, Marvin, right? So what's the story like when you got to Canada, like about your name? Do you have any problems to express yourself and to talk about it?
Oh, hell yeah. It's a funny story, actually.
What happened? We'd like to know actually about it.
Well, I was trying to say my name, and people were like, what's your name? And I'm like, it's Marvin. And so, like, we don't roll the R as much.
I think there's no rolling R in German, is there?
Yeah. Like, we kind of do it.
It's more like the British R, like Marvin, something like this.
Yeah, it's more like, just put the emphasis on the A. And
Exactly.
on the R. And so you don't really hear the R in the German way. You just say Marvin.
Exactly.
So, yeah. I was confused because I expected that people know my name, but they didn't. or they do, but they just couldn't understand me. So it was kind of a funny moment.
So you had to rename yourself and rebrand yourself as Marvin. Like, you're like, my name is Marvin, idiot, Marvin, right?
Exactly. And it happens to quite a few Germans, actually, that they just say their names different here.
All right.
Actually, you Marvin know Lars, who is also German, and he was on the show too. But so that he had the same problem, and I don't remember having that problem with you, maybe because we texted beforehand. But I remember he was saying his name is like, I don't say, tell me if I'm wrong, but something like Lars.
Lars, exactly. That's the German way.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what?
Excuse me. Wow.
Exactly.
Pretty tough, man.
You kind of get into like a dilemma because like you have your German name and you know how you'd say it at home, but then you come into a foreign country and sure you can be like, okay, I'm gonna stick with my original name, I'm gonna push for it, but everybody is not gonna understand you.
Of course.
Like, and they know like the German name, but just say it differently. So if you just say it in the Canadian or English way, people understand you. So you just like you have to go with it, otherwise it's such a pain.
And of course, sometimes some of my friends from around the world, when they come to America, like they somehow pick up American names or like they make nicknames. Like a Marvin would be something like, I don't know, like a Max or like a Marty or something like this. Like they pick up some nicknames. You ever thought about that?
Yeah, some people call me Marv, but
Marv.
I call him Marvs.
Marvs. Wow, that's pretty cool, man. That's amazing. Glad things are fine on your end because at least your name, you can like use M.A. I remember once I was in Beijing, and of course the name Daniel there is meaningless, right? So everybody who goes to Beijing has to pick a Chinese name, and like I literally had to look for a Chinese name because if you say, for example, what's out, Daniel Mulligan, like what the hell are you talking about? Like they get confused, right? But if you choose like a Chinese nickname, they like get you completely, right? So perhaps from my perspective, like the best way is to just somehow have a nickname, but like in a cool way. Like my name is Marty, but actually it's Marvin. So remember that, like kind of like in a cool way. All right, very nice. So first of all, Marvin, how are you doing, man? Long time no see. We wanted to have the show a lot, way back, but you were apparently on your way to Germany.
yes, I was home for a bit. Like I was, yeah.
So where do you live in Germany exactly? Which city?
I'm close to Frankfurt.
Frankfurt, fantastic, nice place. Very well.
It's a small village, actually. It's not too big. Like, I'm not from Frankfurt.
Oh, really? So you live near Frankfurt?
Yeah, Frankfurt. It's like you'd say here, I'm from Toronto. I'm at Guelph right now, so, it's...
But you say I'm from Toronto. I like it.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. It's kind of like the guys.
People that are not from Canada, they won't know Guelph, for example, and so I just say, okay, I'm from Toronto. Same I'd say I'm from Frankfurt.
And one quick question, of course, it's not about our topic today, but very quickly, how is the culture like spread out in your country? Like, because I love Frankfurt, and of course I love Berlin, and a lot of our flights, especially our intercontinental flights from the U.S., actually lands in Frankfurt first and then goes to other places.
Oh, yeah.
So, what is like? Is your culture like in your let's say town different than let's say Frankfurt's cultures or Berlin, or like the country as a whole is like they just follow the same culture?
I'd say it's quite different, actually. Yeah. So, of course, you always have the difference between small cities and large cities. Like, there's a different mentality in larger cities, I'd say. But also, specifically for Germany, I'd probably argue that, like in a small village where I'm from, like it's 3,000 people, there's not, like, everybody knows each other.
Wow.
There's different traditional stuff that's going on. And so, yeah, life is quite different there, I'd say.
Interesting.
I've never lived at Frankfurt personally, but yeah, I'd say it's quite a difference.
Fantastic. And the last cultural question before we move on to the topic of the show, which is something entirely different, and that is, what do you love the most about the German culture?
Oh, wow.
Because I really believe that, I literally think of the German language as probably the smartest language in every way. Number one, pronunciation rules in your language are very, very consistent. For example, in English, like we have different pronunciations for different words, but like in German, everything has its, basically pronunciation. So what's a claw, like K has always one sound, A has always one sound, IE has one sound. So it's a very orderly language, basically. Of course, I have one problem with your language, and that's the length of the words. I remember once I found a German word that was 18 letters long, man. I was like literally going crazy. Like, is that a word or a freaking 3 sentences put together or like maybe typo? It was crazy, man.
It's like nothing. 18 is nothing, though.
Oh my goodness. Like longer words?
Yeah, you could easily...
Can you say one of them?
Would you like to say the longest word you know in German?
There's this classic one. Wait, let me get it together. It's Schifffahrtsdampfgesellschaftskapitän or something like that.
Oh my gosh, wow.
He has to take time to pronounce, put it together.
Literally, and he's a native speaker, by the way. It's amazing, wow. So, overall, I love it.
Probably could stack it up even more, could add some words at the end. That's always a key.
Wow.
It's a possibility.
Fantastic. I like it. It's pretty good. So, you mentioned about the best part of the German culture you like the most.
I'd say it's kind of, the precision and things is kind of nice, like language, how Germans work. Sure, there's a lot of stereotypes there, like, Germans are efficient, blah, blah, blah. From another perspective, one could say, it's a lot of bureaucracy as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's a bit of two-sided metal. But generally I'd say, the precision and things is quite nice.
And I was watching a German TV show a while back, basically, and they were very critical of Merkel. I think most foreigners, they don't know exactly about the politics of Germany. Like, they think everything is fine there. But I heard Merkel is like a subject of satires and comedies and not very liked in that country. Is that true?
Kinda. So she's less liked in Germany than outside of Germany.
Exactly. I had no idea. I was really surprised when I saw all these comedies making fun of her all the time. Like, dude, I thought she was popular back home, but apparently she's not.
Yeah. No, there's a good movement that is kind of fed up with her. It's her 13th year as chancellor, and so people are just fed up with her. And she's the issue with her is, I think, is that she's pretty outspoken internationally, but she's kind of quiet within the country. There's not a lot of movement. Germans feel like everything is the same. It's not going to change. No new policies. There's problems piling up, but it's kind of people feel like maybe it's time for the next one.
Oh, probably. And do you have a democratic constitution? Like, you have elections? I mean, how could he or she actually serve for 13 years? Like the president, or you don't have, of course, a president. You have a chancellor, I believe. So how could she serve for so long?
Well, if she gets elected, she can serve forever.
Oh, really? Oh, my.
In the US, there's no limit on the amount of years, how often you
Oh, man. I wish we had that law in the U.S., man. Obama was still our president. God damn it. Unbelievable, man.
On the other hand, Trump would be indefinitely.
That's also good news. Yeah, that's right. Very well. So enough politics, enough German, and we love German people. I'm a huge fan of your culture and language, as well as the general efficiency of your country, Marvin. And of course, we're going to call you Marvin, but sometimes if you got upset, we're going to call you Marvin. Don't worry about it. We're going to use both to make you happy. And for today, our topic, that's right, is technological disruption and finding solutions such as basically having a global income that is equal and egalitarian. So first of all, Pouya, what exactly is technological disruption?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's good to define things because, I mean, it's a broad term that you can go into details, obviously, but essentially with changes in technology, which already happened, but it's going to only happen rapidly and more broadly so in the future. With changes in technology, a lot of jobs has been displaced. A lot of people have been out of work, and this is going to keep happening. We know it's going to happen.
Exactly.
For good, and this is, whether you agree with it or not, this is not something you can actually stop at this point. So the argument on that note would be non-practical. So the point is, we know these changes are coming. We know a lot of people are going to be out of jobs. For example, we have, at least in the United States and or North America in general, we have a big population who are relying for their day-to-day, paychecks, basically. Life, the work they do is just basically driving, and self-driving cars are the one prominent promise of the technology that is to come. And with that, a lot of these folks would have to be displaced at some point. There are arguments that this is going to be gradual or instant or something. That's irrelevant. Eventually, it's going to happen. So this is what we call technological disruptions, because it's disrupting a lot of things that we're used to, and this is the conventional way of doing things. And with that change, we have to be able to adopt as quickly as it comes. So that's an issue for sure.
Fantastic. Great way to define it. Now that we've defined the terminology, let's talk about the impacts and how we're going to see this in the future. So, Marvin, what is your perspective regarding the future of technological disruption, and how will this affect our societies in the coming years and decades from your perspective?
I think we're going to see immensely huge changes in the future. Like things that we barely can imagine right now are going to be handled differently. So we're going to have technology that replaces jobs, technology that require different kind of jobs. So most of the stuff that we probably going to talk about today is related to like work and like how we organize work and what technology we use for work. And I think we're going to see immensely changes, like huge changes there. And it feels like we're not really prepared for it.
Wow.
As always, classic humans, I'd say. Things just happen, and then they have to deal with it. And I think this is gonna hit us in the future. And
wow.
We already see it, and we can find solutions for it right now. And I hope we figure this thing out.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned a lot about the issue of employment. Of course, the current U.S. president apparently doesn't have a goddamn clue what that problem is, and he believes that manufacturing jobs are the best jobs ever. Let's open the coal mine. So he believes that this trend will continue. And of course, we're already seeing a serious damage to the very basically structure of the U.S. economy. And as we already know, 2020, we expect to have a major global economic crisis because of all of these things. And the trend is just getting started. So we don't want to scare our audiences here, but let's be honest, guys, the threat is real and the change is coming. A lot of the jobs that we currently rely on for running our societies will disappear, and not necessarily in decades, some of them in less than a few years, right? So we want to find out if there is any solution for this problem, because let's be honest, we can't stop technology. It's going to grow no matter what we do. So since we cannot stop the basically progress made in technology, we have to think of other more social, political aspects to deal with this issue effectively. So Pouya, I'm going to move on to you here. From your perspective, This issue is very dire and serious, but what are your perspectives regarding solving this issue with other means? Because we can't stop technology. We can't stop the AI from getting so good that it can do almost everything by itself. So what do you think are some of the solutions here to help humanity somehow go through this crisis?
Right. I mean, first of all, yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't stop it. And let me be clear. This is something that if you put the problem of unemployment aside and put it in perspective, this is the thing that we want to happen, because these are the tools that help us, optimize our performance and not kill our workers or people who don't want to do particular jobs, for example. It's just like they have to do it because they have to feed their families, etc. So, I mean, not obviously there's so many categories, and I'm not narrowing down to one or two, but in general, these are the types of jobs that we're talking about, at least in the initial stages. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to face these problems. We're still going to face these problems, as you mentioned, and we're going to have to come up with ways to solve them. Honestly, if you're asking me, I don't think I know the answer to that question, and that's the problem. I don't think anybody particularly well does. And I mean, I don't want to make it dramatic, but I think this is one of those issues that we need a Manhattan Project style level project to solve this problem, because like there are a lot of suggestions of problems thrown out there, but there's so many holes and they're not particularly defined. We haven't done studies. For example, one of the classic ones is universal basic income. First of all, what do we mean by universal basic income? I'm not really convinced that works. Do we mean literally universal, meaning across all of the earth, meaning that we will tax people in New York and Silicon Valley, the riches, and then send them to the third world countries that are struggling? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the population of America is prepared to accept that, even if you want to do that. So these are the issues that first of all, it's not even defined well. Second of all, we haven't done experiments to see if they even work. So I think.
But let me stop you right now, Pouya. Don't you think that this universal basic income is something more like a universal form of communism and socialism?
Well, again, it depends on how you define it. It could very well be that.
Because we saw what communism basically did in the 20th century, and we know the results. It was quite clear that this methodology and what Marx basically, and Marxism as well as Leninism and all these things, they tried to change that. They knew that they wanted to create that universal approach to income, but we already know what happened in the Soviet Union. And I work in Moscow, I work in Russia, so I'm quite aware of the current changes in the economy, and there the economy is struggling a lot because it's now 25 years out of communism, and that level of capitalism is still on its feet and it's not quite well prepared. So are you saying that the solution is to somehow make the whole world a communistic bloc?
Well, the difference, no, because at least the popular proposal of the universal basic income, the general definition they gave is not to basically, have like a communist center that is in control of all the resources and wealth and land and everything, and then distributes amongst people. It's to define a basic needs of humanity, every single human being and their families, depending on how they are they single, etc. And say for their mere survival, how much they would need, not to die, basically. Again, I mean, not just not to die, but with a basic quality of life, I suppose, as well. And then that would become a universal basic salary, because the thinking there is that we technically cannot guarantee these people to have jobs, to be able to hold jobs, and then we can't let them die either. It's not the idea of communism that we want to, not with that mindset, but with a different mindset. And if you want to basically earn more, then that's a different story. You're going to have to go out of your way and struggle to, like today, basically.
Interesting. Good point. Yeah. We're going to talk about this a lot, because I'm going to go right now to Marvin, because Marvin, of course, you're from Germany. And as we know, the European Union in general is a lot more socialistic, basically. So for that being said, I want to actually right now move on to you and ask you about your perspective. So do you think that in the current situation that we are facing right now around the world, having the idea, the concept of a universal basic income will work? I mean, now we are seeing a lot of problems and catastrophes in basically Europe. One of my colleagues, basically, and his wife, they're from France. And I was talking to these guys literally last week about this issue. And the first word that he said, like, Dan, France, catastrophe. Like, things are problematic now. People are rising against the wealthy and capitalism. And of course, Germany, I'm pretty sure that the tax rates there are quite high compared to the US, for example. So given that you know very well about how your system works in basically Germany, do you think the idea of having a universal basic income will be useful?
It's a tough question. The thing is, we don't really know yet. Like, the thing is, it's an idea that came up and it gets more and more popular, but it's not really been tested yet. So we're not really sure about the outcomes of this thing. Like, we don't know if people are going to be more free, or, if they just take all the money and spend it on booze. Like, we don't really know that, like, for sure. But I want to come back to, like, the communist part that you mentioned.
That's right.
I think the basic income is more like an alternative to welfare. So in that sense, it's much more like a social tool to organize and help people that need it.
Mm-hmm.
In comparison to, like, communism, where we completely organize the economy by a party or by a person, maybe even. And so that's quite different, actually. We wouldn't overthrow capitalism in itself. We'd still kind of have that, and it's just kind of a reorganization of welfare. And so
I mean, you're talking about welfare right now, Marvin, because one of my friends, basically, her name is Morgan, and she lives in Sweden. And she talked about the issue that in Sweden now, since there's this intensive, like, healthcare, Medicare, welfare thing going on, there are professional alcoholics who receive their unemployment benefit every month and literally spend all their time at the bar, gambling, going around. I mean, do you really think, we are seeing this right now. This is not something that we have not seen. I'm not sure about Germany, if you have this level of unemployment benefits in Germany, but in Sweden, I'm pretty sure that we have professional alcoholics. Like, their job is literally going to a bar, getting drunk and talking all day long. That's all they do, because they have this, welfare, if you call it, and they have it every single month, so they don't have to worry about getting a career or something. So, I don't know about Germany, whether or not you have this level of coverage there, but do you think this is appropriate to somehow give people money just because they're there?
Yes, I think that. The issue with people spending the money on booze or whatever, sure, you will see people doing that, but I'd argue it's a small portion of people, and sure, you will, like, they will stand out in a way, and they will, like, be a really negative example of this. But with that being said, like, look at these people. Like, it's not a happy life. They don't own the system. They're kind of, I would say losers in a way. But this is not, like, if you want to come up with, like, welfare systems, you have to own it. You have to accept that people are going to spend it on things that they shouldn't spend it on. But that's kind of the price that you pay. And I think what you get back is much more worth than some people spending it on alcohol.
Interesting.
So I think it will enable people. It will enable people to live a decent life. Not always and not everywhere. Like, there's difference. Probably Sweden has a good one. Germany is kind of, it's not the best welfare system. But it will enable people to survive, and maybe the idea is to get some education, maybe get a better job, and basically come back to life. It's a security net, and you see, if you compare countries that have a good welfare system to countries that don't, you will see immensely big differences in levels of happiness and in terms of economic production. It's interesting. Like, an argument that often comes up is, it's expensive, we just waste the money. But if you take a country like Denmark or Sweden, which have, like, well-established welfare systems, they also have a good GDP, and they're productive, and their citizens are happy in comparison to countries that don't really have it, like the U.S.
Oh my gosh! Don't even talk about Trump, man. Oh, don't even talk about him.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't want to mention it, but, like, just cutting isn't going to help. And at certain points, you have to spend, and you have to own that just some people are going to waste it, but you'll have much more people that actually need it, and they're going to they're going to use it well, I think.
Very well point. I like it, actually. Now, let's move back here to Pujix about how we can actually implement a universal basic income. And from your perspectives, let's be honest, we have a lot of different nations around the world. And as you can see, as the recent trade wars between the United States and China proved, sometimes the interests do not basically match, and we have to somehow deal with certain tensions in geopolitics as well as relationship between the nations. So how in the world are we going to bring all these countries together? I mean, Trump literally said, sorry, I got to build a wall. No time for the global forum, economic forum. So how in the world are we going to create a universal system where we can pay everybody around the world equal income using the same currency? I mean, how in the world are we going to literally agree on which currency to put that universal income in, let alone actually provide it? And how will these governments come to an agreement to actually make that a reality?
Yeah, you have a very good point here, and I can't, honestly, at this point with the current political spectrum that we see, I can't see it actually happening. So hence the reason that I said maybe the Manhattan level project required. But and when you well, I'm not completely up to date with the academic literacy, but when you talk to people who are seeing this and trying to tackle this actually practically, they're really talking about national level, not universal in the sense of one nation, not in the sense of the whole world, which is not actually the big problem, because the big problem are not the people who are going to be starving in the United States. Sure, that's a problem, but the bigger problem is with the developing countries who are relying on these types of jobs that are quickly going to be irrelevant, completely irrelevant, and they will be. And there's another level to this problem. It's not just people not having jobs and not being able to feed themselves and their families. That's obviously a big problem, and maybe the second one that I'm going to mention is actually very much interwoven. But the other aspect is people of this class, all over the world, where we're seeing already, maybe that's one of the backfires of 2016 elections in the United States, but in general, they are seeing themselves more and more becoming irrelevant, and that's on a psychological level super, whether that's true or not, that's what is being perceived by them. On a psychological level, this is very, very dangerous, and it could have big, consequences.
I mean, let me jump in right now, because I work in international business and I'm familiar. You mentioned just the U.S. here. I don't think the problem is just the U.S. I mean, for example, think about the Brexit. Recently, we were talking about Brexit and England leaving the European Union. I mean, literally, even the European Union itself cannot agree on maintaining England as part of its members. Of course, I also know a lot about Middle East and now the struggle between the nations of Kuwait, Qatar, Dubai, Emirate, that is, as well as, let's say, Yemen and Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, we have like the Middle East issues, basically, between Iran and Israel. Then we have like Russia right now fighting with Ukraine. So when you look at the world right now, I mean, just ignore. I mean, less the U.S., of course, there's a lot of problems here, like the U.S. and China's trade war. That's a serious problem. But anywhere in this world that I've worked, I have seen these discrepancies and these lacks of agreements that are currently quite visible to all of us around the world. So, I mean, right now, we have this problem everywhere, at least in the places that I have worked personally. And I just don't see any way where these countries can agree on something as literally difficult to agree upon as a universal basic income, because we're literally talking about handing people free money. And that's going to take a lot of negotiations, and probably, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. I don't know, really.
Yeah, well, I'm with you on that, and the only reason I'm making the example of the United States is because almost everybody's familiar with them. But yeah, I agree with you. It's a big problem.
Interesting. So, Marvin, we've already talked about this issue, this finding a solution for this, and we've talked about income. But could there be any way to create a new type of employment? I mean, for example, think about the 20th century, right? And we had a lot of manufacturing jobs. And if you read the biographies, I'm a huge fan of one of my favorite, basically, mentors is Mr. Rockefeller. I read almost all of his biographies. And at that time, almost everybody gave up hope on oil. And they thought that it's never going to happen. It's going to go out very soon. And then somehow things changed. And then as we entered the 20th century, and things changed a little bit, we thought oh my gosh, no more jobs, and suddenly the cars were manufactured. So right now, the threat of losing jobs is real, but could there be any way to create new forms of employment where we do not have to deal with the issue of mass unemployment?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of the technology that we're gonna see is still gonna require humans, at least for the next 50, 100 years, I'd say. So a lot of the technology and AI is advancing, sure, but you're still gonna see that humans have to make the decisions. Humans have to make design decisions. All these kind of things. They're gonna require people that know the technology and they also know the field. And so what we have right now is people specialized in certain fields. Think of a doctor, for example. A doctor knows the human body pretty well, but might not know that much about technology or AI in particular. And so in the future, I think a key criteria is going to be that humans understand technology as well and can apply it in different work contexts. Overall, I'd say all the jobs are going to be more specific, so we need more education and we need better trained people to do them, and that's going to require a huge change in education and all these things. And so, yeah, quite disruptive. I think we can handle it. We have to, in a way. Don't want to be negative here all the time. Coming back though to the universal basic income, it's never going to happen on a worldwide stage as long as we have nations.
Exactly.
As long as we have countries, as long as there's fights, as long as people identify themselves more with their country rather than seeing humanity in one boat, we're not going to see universal basic income. This is never going to happen.
I mean, just think about the amount. I mean, literally, what amount are we going to choose? For example, 1,000 euros in Sweden is almost nothing, whereas the same 1,000 euros in places like China can make you super rich. This is going to, how are we going to even determine the amount? What amount? What currency? How is it even possible? Because different countries have different GDP rates, different costs of living. And my experience proves to me actually that if I have to spend time in Dubai, I have to spend a lot more money, for example, than I have to spend time in, let's say, Serbia. So how are we going to even agree upon the amount that is a universal basic income?
Very true. And not just comparing countries, just look within a country, city versus non-city. It's impossible. Yeah. To say you need to have a huge table and saying for every region how much you should get, and then an argument always for the basic income is it lowers administration, it causes less bureaucracy and these kind of things, which is I think it's a false argument because you still have that, we just talked about it, how do you determine how much a person gets? Sure, the idea is universal, but isn't that fair? If somebody has a health condition, for example, or lives in a city, I feel like it would be fair to take that into account. Mm-hmm. And so a universal income that just gives the same money to everyone is kind of unfair.
Exactly.
In that sense.
It's really unfair in that case. Just the very essence of we are trying to promote egalitarianism, but actually it becomes very, very unfair because that 1,000 euros handout will make that Chinese citizen he will be super happy, dude, look what I can do right now, versus somebody, I don't know, let's say in Denmark, right? So it's going to create a lot of problems. And I don't know, personally, it seems almost impossible to be implemented. So Pouya, what do you think about this? Is this thing really impossible, or is there any other solution for this issue? I mean, how do we deal with technological disruption?
Well, I mean, it's a big challenge for sure. I don't know if it's ever possible, and I'm particularly not a big fan of. Again, I'm not very up to date on the literacy either. So maybe there has been breakthroughs. Maybe they have different, definition coming into. I know that, for example, Ontario in Canada is doing a pilot project on universal basic income within the province. I don't know how that's panning out, and maybe I should have been reading on it before this.
There's no results yet.
Right. So bottom line is that this is good that we are experimenting, because that's a point. Like that's what I'm saying. Like even with all that we said, which makes absolute sense. I agree with both you and Marvin, especially regarding okay, this is not fair. That's one problem. You can then change that. That's still manageable. Very hard, but still manageable. Change that universality, not based on the amount that you're giving to people, but rather the impact that you're creating in people's lives. That again, very hard, but still manageable. But my point is that there can be potentially lots of other problems that we're not even seeing before implementing them. So obviously studies need to be done, whether theoretical and in practice, actually pilot projects, etc. But beyond that, I don't really think that's neither the absolute necessity, maybe at some point, but not in the next 10 years maybe, and most importantly not the only thing that we need to do, even if it's something that we need to do. And I think as Marvin mentioned, people knowing how technology works more than ever and being able to use them will become ever more important. And there is also another case that Yuval Noah Harari makes about this, and that is we are going to have to, in the years to come, we are going to have to keep reinventing ourselves because all these jobs keeps changing.
Precisely.
One of the skills that we have to learn to be able to cope with reinvention of ourselves, which I think amongst all the arguments I've heard, that makes a lot more sense to me practically than anything else that I've heard in this context.
What a great discussion. And we're out of time here, so let's try to actually wrap up the conversation and reach a conclusion. So, Marvin, today we talked a lot about the issue of technological disruption and proposing a solution as universal basic income. So, after all that we talked, what is now your overall, basically, taking of this discussion, and what is your conclusion?
I think the time for the universal basic income has not come yet. It might be in the future. It might be that we kind of solve other problems first, like climate change and trade wars and whatever. So we can have a consensus and we can come together, and then we can have a discussion about things like these. But so far, I don't think it's going to happen in the future anytime soon. But that being said, I think the idea, the basic income often is like a populist idea. If you think about it, it's easy, and it's supposedly solves a lot of problems, and so I think it kind of makes sense to look at what these problems are and then maybe target them specifically. So maybe a thing is a lot of the misery that people experience nowadays is because of employment models that are really unfair and they push wages down, like people don't earn a lot of money, they work bad hours, stuff like that. And I think if we tackle these a bit more, maybe increasing the minimum wage, I think that might be, at least for the short, medium future, might be a better way to handle these things.
What a great way to put it.
I think and another thing that comes with it, and we don't see that right now, is we have to put more money into education. The education system is just at a really, really bad state. It's like 100 years old. Like we're not gonna solve the problems that are coming to us in the next 100 years with that system. And so I think if we kind of talk a bit more about these things, if we renew them and advance them, I think we have a better chance to lift people out of poverty and help people live a decent life.
Fantastic. Great comments. And you, Pouya, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, although it was our last episode, education wasn't really fresh on my mind. I think that could be possibly, because no matter what comes next, the first step is that people need to be equipped with the skills and be educated on the matters that they need to deal with, whether at work or in their lives or whatever. So that definitely is a good investment no matter what. And yes, I mean, again, this turned out to be more pessimistic than I thought it's going to be, but it's not really. Yeah, it's because it's going to hit us in the face very quickly. It's not something we can ignore, and I'm not really that pessimistic about it. It's just that it is a problem, and it is a big one, and we need to be talking about it, which is becoming more and more popular in terms of a topic, but still not good enough, I think.
What a great discussion. I just enjoyed every single, basically, second of it, and I really appreciate both of you guys sharing your thoughts and ideas and somehow helping our audience understand this real dramatic issue that is going to basically afflict a lot of us in the coming decades. So hopefully things will be great, and I want to thank both of you guys, Pouya and Marvin, for your great and wonderful contributions.
Well, thank you.
And to all of the listeners out there, thank you very much for following the show. We are getting a lot of great feedback. And of course, thanks to your attention, we are going up in popularity. So if you have any ideas or suggestions, please leave them on our website at basically potbean.com, or you can simply contact us directly, send a DM perhaps, or suggest certain topics or ideas for the show. We'd like to listen to basically your ideas and hear from you. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Daniel Mulligan, and this was Beyond the Present Podcast.